Great. Well, welcome everyone to our panel entitled Knowing What is Okay, Recruiting Research Participants from the Community. And this was co-organized by the Institute for Clinical and Translational Science, the Program in Public Health, and the Institute for Future Health. I'm Michael Hoyt. I am an associate professor in the Program for Public Health. And we're just so happy to present this today. This has been part of a series. We had the first panel a while back on recruiting in a more clinical context, which has been recorded and available on the ICTS website. And again, I'll remind you if you have questions to type them into the Q&A chat, and I'll turn it over to Amir.
Thank you, Michael. We have great panels today. I would like to introduce our panelists and also co-organizer of this event, Dr. Margaret Schneider. So without any particular order, I'll just follow the list. Our first panelist is Josh. Josh Krill is director of the Institute for Memory Impairments and Neurological Disorders at UCI and conducts research on the topic of how to successfully recruit and retain research participants into clinical trials. He also established and oversees the Consent to Contact Registry at UCI. Adriana Gombasov is the second panelist. She manages the Acute and Retention Consulting Service at the ICTS and works with Josh to provide one-on-one consultations to researchers seeking to optimize the recruitment and retention strategies. Dara Sutkin is Associate Director of ITEQC, a research program investigating the use of translational techniques to enhance medical care, and Director of the Community Engagement and Community Engagement Unit at the ICTS. Robin Zender manages the day-to-day operations of the Community Engagement Unit at the ICTS, including the Campus Community Research Incubator Awards. Pamela Pimentel, she's a community representative to the ICTS Steering Committee and brings to this role a considerable experience as both a nurse and a CEO of a community-based organization providing prenatal care to low-income women. She's also co-author on several research papers with UCI faculty. Monique Davis is Executive Director at El Sol Science and Arts Academy in Santa Ana and co-author on several research papers with UCI faculty. The great thing is that both Pam and Monique have partnered with academic researchers to carry out community-based research and will offer their insights on how to successfully carry out this kind of research. My co-organizer here today, Dr. Margaret Schneider. She's Associate Director of the ICTS and will moderate the question and answer period at the end of the panel. So during the panel presentation, you may post your questions to the Q&A, I guess, and they will be addressed at the end of this session. So I would like to hand it over again to Michael for the introduction, continuing the panel.
Great, thank you. So of course, the topic and focus of today's panel is on recruiting from the community, broadly defined into research focused on health issues. And so to do that, the format that we're going to use is present a series of vignettes to highlight some of the key issues, challenges, and questions that often come up in this type of recruitment. And the goal is really to try to identify some of the basic and some of the trickier issues and questions that different folks face. And just want to acknowledge that some questions that come up are not easily answered or answerable, and hopefully some will be well informed by our great panel today. And as we begin to dive into vignette number one, I just mentioned that today's panel is recorded, which you probably already know. All right, so let's think about the first vignette here. And I'm just gonna read the beginning of it to get us started. So Sean is a researcher at UCI who is studying predictors of glycemic control among Latino populations in Orange County and wants to begin with a basic questionnaire to identify potential biobehavioral targets for an intervention study. So given that, the first question I'm going to throw out to our panel is, what are some resources that are available here at UCI that would help Sean recruit community-based research participants? And so maybe to get started, Josh or Adriana want to jump in.
Sure, thanks, Michael. I'll try to get us started, and I'm sure Adriana can fill in the gaps that I leave. I want to begin by saying thanks to Margaret and the ICTS for the opportunity to be a part of today's webinar. I think it's great that we are creating a place where conversations about things like recruitment can happen, because it is such an important topic. It's one of the most consistent challenges that investigators face, and really a determinant of what studies are going to succeed and fail in many ways. And I think that what Adriana and I spend our time doing in our respective capacities as part of the ICTS accrual and retention consult services, helping people think through some of these issues. And in particular, for people like Sean, I always like to very strongly recommend that they start thinking about recruitment the minute they start thinking about doing their study at all. There's never too early to start thinking about recruitment, because it is such a key determinant of what study is going to succeed and which is going to fail. So when you're designing a study, you need to think about, are people going to be willing to do what you're asking them to do? Are you asking for a few ounces of blood? Or are you asking for a gallon of blood? Are you asking for visits once a month? Or are you asking for visits once a day? Reality needs to take shape, and feasibility has to really have a big impact on how you make design choices about your study. And that ultimately is going to include, how are you going to find the people you need in order to answer your research question? And you asked specifically about resources. I think we're very fortunate to work in such a large county, such a diverse county, such an outstanding academic institution where there are a lot of resources available. And we did start one new one a few years ago explicitly to try to help investigators be successful in recruiting. And it was mentioned in the introduction. We call it the UC Irvine Consent to Contact Registry, or C2C registry. This is what we call a recruitment registry. This is a repository of people, and we have just under 5,000 people today who have provided informed consent, basically saying it's okay to contact them about studies that they might be appropriate for. They're not obligated to participate, but we collect data on them in order to try to make it as efficient a tool for investigators as possible. So when people enroll in the C2C, they tell us a little bit about themselves, their age, their sex, their race and ethnicity. And then we also ask about their medical conditions, any medications they might take. This is all self-reported data, but can still be very helpful in thinking about whether people in the registry might be appropriate for a study. And then I think very importantly, and different from a lot of registries that are out there, we ask them 9 questions about what they're willing to do as it relates to research procedures. And so if someone says they're not willing to be in a study that involves an MRI, we're in a position to not refer them to a study that requires one. So Adriana can provide some basic statistics, but so far we have referred more than 5,000 people. We haven't quite got 5,000 people in the registry yet, but we've referred more than 5,000 people to be in studies. And about a third of those people have actually enrolled in those studies. And so we think this is a really meaningful, powerful tool to efficiently help people do a good job of recruiting to their studies. But the last point I'll make before I turn over to Adriana is that we don't think this should be the only source of recruitment. And so again, when someone's designing a study, they want to think about all the possible ways they can try to recruit participants to their study. And the C2C might be a great source, but it shouldn't be your only source. And you really are going to want to pursue as many options as possible. You're going to want to, in particular, try to think about the diversity of your sample. We're very happy that about 30% of the C2C so far is from non-white races or Hispanic ethnicity, but you know, this is a very important consideration, and so thinking about community partners, which we'll hear much more about today, and other sources of diverse participants will also be a key thing for an investigator to think about. Adriana, go ahead and fill in my gaps.
Sure, I think great overview of everything. I just wanted to highlight, in addition to the C2C, that we do have, we provide one-on-one consults with researchers. So like Josh said, it's never too early to start thinking about your recruitment plans. You can reach out to us and with you, so you can share your recruitment tactics with us, and we can kind of give you some feedback on what you have ran. And then the C2C registry, you can just email me for that, and I'll put a link to our website that has my contact information on there, so that way you can go there directly. But I'll continue on the conversation.
And maybe just one last thought. I don't know if it was just on my end, there was a little bit of a pause, and Adriana was saying that we're always happy to meet with individual investigators to help them think through some of these issues. And one of the things that we've been doing, we particularly enjoy working with young investigators who are doing their first studies and thinking about these issues perhaps for the first time or among the first times. And we're happy to help with grants as well. And increasingly, we know that NIH reviewers are very keen to examine the feasibility of a study and whether the investigator really has thought through how they're going to recruit their sample. And even if you get your grant funded, now NIH in particular is checking on how you're doing with recruitment. So I think these issues really remain paramount, and we want to help everyone at UCI be as successful as possible.
Great, great. So maybe Dara or Robin have some things to add here on this one.
Thank you, Michael. I also want to echo the sentiment of gratitude to Margaret and Michael and Amir for putting this together. I'm really fortunate to be able to work with two outstanding ladies, Pam Pimentel and Robin Zender, as part of the community engagement unit for the ICTS. And I think we bring to the table a lot of experience working and trying to create meaningful relationships across our community. I guess I want to start by just saying that when we think about community and doing, community-based work, we have to remember that the community is a heterogeneous entity. Like there's no single community. There's no single CBO. It's a collection of organizations, nonprofit, education, for-profit, big, small. It's a collection, like a web of entities out there who are working in the community and trying to create meaningful connections between, we see our role as creating those meaningful connections between this, heterogeneous web and supporting the mission of the university. That being said, the community organizations that we work with, they have past experiences with UCI. They also have past experiences with each other. And most importantly, they have a job to do that is different and unique from the job that we as researchers have to do here at UCI. And I think recognizing and just touching on the complexities of what that all means, I'm sure we can disentangle that a little bit over the next hour and a half, but it does mean that I saw that the prompt here was, the question was, what are resources available at UCI to help Sean recruit community-based participants? And the question really, as framed, almost in some ways, I think sets up a little bit of a misunderstanding about what is the role of why we want to partner with community-based organizations to begin with. And I have found that when I reach out to my community partners, there's quite a bit of difference of opinion as to how interested they are, how willing they are, how able they are to engage in a dialogue around working with the communities that they represent to support recruitment on the studies that I'm trying to develop. So So let me break that apart a little bit. So community-based organizations are in the business to provide a service to reach their core aims, right? So educational institutions are out there to educate. Community-based organizations are there to deliver and meet the aims of that institution. And so to the extent that we're trying to find and work with a community-based organization, we need to help the community-based organization and articulate what is the value or advantage to them for participating in this effort, right? Because if they don't see, if there's no win-win for them, then it's hard to imagine then why they might be motivated to engage in this activity with us. And I think Pam and Monique are going to talk a little bit more about that as we get further into our scenarios. But I just wanted to lay out that to begin to develop a relationship with a community-based organization requires that you begin to think of the relationship, right? And I often, when I'm trying to teach this to my graduate students, I think about this as like, what would you do when you want to enter into any relationship with a person? You have to get to know them, right? You have to date. You have to start to articulate, what are your values? What are my values? What do you want from me? What do I want from you? So along that line, I'll move it to what we do at the ICTS. So if you are thinking to yourself, well, I would like to start a relationship with a community-based organization, but I don't really know where to start. Well, we have like the version of, what's a dating app? I can't think of one, but swipe left or swipe right. So we have created meaningful relationships with many organizations across Orange County and Los Angeles. And so as a result, if you have an interest in working with a particular community, the first thing that you can do is you can reach out to Pam or Robin or myself, and we can, through our ties, begin to really think about who have been great partners for us in the past. What is an organization that we can think of that might have some of the same goals as yours, and do some introductions. So we have that's one of the services that we offer, and maybe Robin can expand on this a little bit. We also have access to a special populations navigator. So there's an individual, Dr. Rao, who also will help us support thinking about how do we engage community groups around particular populations. Some of these may be, really hard to reach. I'm sort of thinking of some of the work we've done in the past, working with individuals who have a chronic illness that is very, a small group of people that we've reached out across the the nation to build some relationships there. So one of the first places that you can start is reaching out to the ICTS. Robin, do you want to talk a little bit about the community engagement studios?
Yeah, you bet. And I wanted to just, another example of what the special populations navigators can help you with are things like Dara said, the hard to reach populations like homeless people or people who are dealing with substance abuse. We also have a specialist who could possibly help with recruiting folks with rare diseases, also domestic violence, veterans, and that kind of thing. So community engagement studios, it's a great model for helping researchers, not only when you're in the middle of a study or just starting a study, get some information from the community to help guide your project, but also if you're writing a grant for a project, what it is, it's a consultative model where we bring in a small group of community experts. So these are folks that have expertise in the lived experience of whatever research topic is under study. And the purpose of this is, of course, to provide input to the research team about either grant application, recruitment methods, materials, dissemination, if you're toward the end of your project, how to disseminate information. And so, you know, we bring these folks into a meeting, and it's so we have a third kind of a neutral party facilitator who facilitates the conversation between the academic researchers and the community folks in order to have like a real level playing field for everybody. And it's a really great way to try to get real authentic information on why, you know, this recruitment method might work over another recruitment method, or ways to change your recruitment materials to draw in the group that you're interested in working with. So I'll stop there for that.
Those sound like great resources for listening to different populations, as well as reaching different community partners. As just a quick follow-up, Robin or Dara, are these services free to UCI researchers? Is there a fee-based structure? How should researchers think about that?
Well, so the consultations are all free, correct? The community engagement studios, that is, I'm not sure how to answer that question, because sometimes we do them for people who are really in a bind, or but then we also, if you're able to help recoup some of the cost of running these studios, we do charge for them if you have a grant that we could charge on that. Do you have a better answer to that, Dara or Adriana?
So in the past, we've met with researchers, and they were in the process of submitting.
Oh, your bandwidth is terrible, Adriana.
I'll turn off my video. Does that help?
I think it might, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So if we meet with researchers in the process of them writing a grant, and at that point we do ask them to include funding for the community engagement studios, so that way we can recoup some of the cost for it. But we have done some of them on an as needed basis.
We also have, I mean, we do have, there are at least 4 that we support annually that are part of the ICTS funding. So if we haven't hit our annual 4, then we do offer them for free. And if we go above that, there's flexibility. So this is a long way of saying, don't let costs be the reason not to do a community engagement studio, or don't let costs be a reason not to reach out to us. We're here to help support the building of meaningful campus community connections.
Great. So let's continue with our vignette and get back to Sean, our UCI researcher, if we recall. So after several meetings with the organization that you might have connected him with, he learns that the organization has their own related but distinct goals, as you have already sort of hinted at. And they've been looking for a research partner to help them identify the impact and efficiency of some of their current programs. Although they have shared interests and goals, Sean finds that he is now spending significant time discussing how to best help his community partner achieve their program evaluation goals. So over time, the project goals have really changed, and Sean realizes the new goals have become specific to the organization and their program evaluation. He finds that he's unable to broaden his recruitment to accomplish his original research goals, but he now feels a responsibility to this organization, but is also feeling frustrated by not getting his original needs met and spending significant amounts of time on a new project that he wasn't really anticipating. So the question for the panel, what are some strategies that Sean might have used to lay the groundwork for a better outcome? And Pam, maybe you're going to be good at getting us started on this.
Thanks, Michael. And I too want to echo my appreciation of being invited by Margaret and Amir Darren's Robin, all my buds. So yeah, so I am, first of all, old. I've been a nurse for 46 years, and I've worked my entire career in the community. And I ran a nonprofit for 20 years. So I have a very, I think, kind of unique love-hate relationship with academia. I've always been into research. I don't think you can be a good nurse without wanting to know outcomes and asking the question, why did this work and why didn't that work? It's just inherent in the profession. And I was first approached in 2007 or maybe 6 by a group of researchers at UCI who were who've been already awarded a large national grant that was longitudinal study and focused on the clients that I served, that both Monique and I served. So just to give you an idea of who they were predominantly Latina, very low income. About half of them were monolingual Spanish, and less than a third had access to regular transportation. So these researchers came to meet with me, and I'm listening to the study, and I'm just thrilled because it's all the questions I've always wanted to know the answers to. And so I asked them what their vision is for the participants and where would they be seen, first of all. Well, I said, will it be a van that goes to the neighborhoods? What? And they said, oh no, we'll have them come down here to Gottschalk's Plaza. From the barrio in Santa Ana to Gottschalk's Plaza. Let me think how many buses that would be. So, well, are you going to provide childcare or someone to watch their kids while you're doing the study? Well, no, we really haven't thought of that. We think they should be able to control their kids. I'm like, okay, we're doing good so far. And I said, how long is the visit going to last? They said, probably about 3 to 4 hours. And I thought, wow, that's a really long time to ask a pregnant woman with a couple kids in tow to come to it. And I said, so I kind of voiced that. And they said, in all honesty, with kind heart, oh, but we're going to give them a certificate to the food court at Fashion Island so they can go get lunch afterwards. And I realized they had no clue with reality, of what's going on, but they were open. So that was my first, and their idea of research was send me all your patients, don't ask me any questions. I'm not even going to tell you what we begin to find out or what our early learnings are. So needless to say, that relationship left me a little bit unsatisfied. Then I met the folks from ICTS, and it was like a breath of fresh air. And I was so impressed that there were academic professors and professionals, researchers that truly had a heart for the community. And so I think that the very first thing is that Sean needed to develop this relationship with whatever nonprofit he's thinking is the type, where his target population is, way before the grants on the table, way before money's on the table, all of those things. And that there has to be almost a collective impact model where two powers come together, check their egos at the door, and really work for a mutual goal. And that mutual goal setting has to be set before anything else. And that's where Sean, had things slip away from him because there was not a clear, common mutual goal. And the second thing is that, and kind of Dara alluded to this, it is a romance in a way because you need them, they don't need you. They have their mission, they have their board, they have their clients, they have their own grants, their own responsibilities. They don't really need, their mission does not include doing research with UCI. So it needs to be attractive to them. And there has to be some of how can I help you? And for the organization that I ran, the research was invaluable to our growth because it's one thing to say we hired a program evaluator to come in and look at our program. It's another thing to say there was rigorous scientific analysis done on this data and the results were. And that kind of, as a nonprofit, and we're all struggling for the same grant dollar, it sets you apart a little bit. And nothing can tell the story of a nonprofit's mission like cold, hard data. And so being able to grasp that it is extremely beneficial. And so I think sometimes it's a power exchange, people from academia, I'm sure I'm the single most uneducated person to ever be a co-author on a grant. I only have 1 degree behind my name. And so, but the real life experience. And so I think researchers would be smart to value the real life experience that the CBO brings to the table, and to open up with, how can I be of help? And that's what Sean neglected to do. He was so fixated on his version but once he got into the whole nonprofit, and I think I also included in the materials an article by Stanford Innovation Review about what drives each nonprofit. I think there's 9 or 10 models. And if you can identify in your work which model that organization is, it will make approaching them a lot easier. I mean, do the homework. If Sean had done the homework on this organization, he might have noticed what their mission is and their values, and been able to come in a little bit more prepared. So I'm not sure I answered the question, Michael, but I had fun. So anyway, so that's me.
So valuable. Thank you. Monique, maybe you have some thoughts here.
Wholly unprepared. I hope that doesn't bode well. Okay, so El Sol is a public charter school. So we're both a community-based organization and an education organization. And I think for us, we see ourselves as a lab. So we view the participation in research as a way to inform the kinds of decisions that we make. So we have lots of research that we do with UCI because it aligns with our core values, which is something that's come up several times from the folks who've already presented, that determining, identifying organizations that have similar core values is important. And relationships continue to come up because you need to find people who have the same risk tolerance, the same outlook tolerance, and people that you can actually work with and that you feel comfortable to be honest with. So from my perspective, Sean was so busy trying to be accommodating and building the relationship that he got swept up in agreeing to do some things that left him a bit far ashore from what he originally intended to do. I think that's why the early relationship building matters so much, because you can kind of get some of that out of the way. Some of the concession making, some of the relational building, so that when it comes time to actually define the research, you're saying, here's what I'm interested in, here's what it looks like, here's what I'm going to be asking for, and here are the frameworks of my research agenda. Not the frameworks for how I'm going to get my research done, because as Pam's example illustrates, the community-based organization has the information that the researcher needs about how you're going to accomplish getting the research done. Not necessarily the goals of your research, but how you're going to get it done. So that's really important. And I want to underscore the probably doing some things together before you go for research funding. That way the stakes aren't as high. But once you get to the place where you're going to start to get IRB, then you're going to start to do things that have defined guidelines. Then everybody needs to be on the same page that there's a restrictive nature to what you want to accomplish, and eliminate some of that confusion. The other thing I want to say is that community-based organizations are protective of their people, because when you leave, they're still there. So you've come into their home essentially. So what you do there is what the community-based organization has to live with. So that's where the high levels of trust come in, and those other things, because they're going to be protective of making sure that they can live with the outcomes of that relationship, the outcomes of that research, and that people have been treated fairly and with respect. And I know that's what everybody wants, but you need to allow the community-based organization to be your guide in that regard.
Monique, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just made a note to myself before you started talking about that our job is to protect our clients. You know, the reason that you need us is because they trust us, and that trust is paramount. So we're not going to do anything that appears that it could harm our clients in any way, shape, or form. And so treating, you know, that I need the guarantee from the academic professor, that researcher, that this patient will be treated well and with kindness and human dignity, and with their needs coming first. And so, yeah, because they trust us. And like Monique said, we'll be there long after you're gone, and we're not going to let anything jeopardize our trust that the client has in us.
That's great. You know, I hear so much here about relationship building and setting expectations, but really it sounds like at the heart of what you're both saying is creating trust. And Dara and Robin, you've probably seen this go different ways in different scenarios. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about sort of building that trust with organizations in the community.
Thanks, Michael. So there's actually been some research done, you know, lo and behold, around what are some of the facilitating factors and barriers that exist around creating community academic partnerships. And I think, you know, not surprising, the most important things that come out are trust and respect between the partners who are engaged in the relationship. I think we've heard that, you know, that message really strongly here today. So then how do you go about creating that trust and respect? And the next highest thing that comes up in this article talks about a shared vision and creating that shared goals and mission. And I guess I would maybe beg to differ a little bit about how much there has to be overlap between the mission and goals of the community-based organization and the researcher. I would say what you need to really start with is an articulated vision and mission, an understanding of what is the mission and vision of the partner that I'm trying to create. How do I understand their needs? How do I understand their viewpoint? Do they understand me? And then from there, finding a piece that you can agree on, something that is shared, even though there may be a lot that's not shared, there still has to be understanding about the core and meaningful differences that exist between you and your partner organization. The most commonly cited hindering factor is actually excessive time commitments. So one of the biggest problems where some of this, you may trust and love your community-based organization, they may trust and love you, but on both sides, there needs to be a recognition that time is finite. And if we ask too much of each other, and in this case, Sean was being, you know, there was a misunderstanding on the part of the CBO about how much time Sean had to commit to whatever they had agreed upon. But that goes both ways. So being very clear around expectations and what can be accomplished, both sides saying no, like, no, we can't do that. No, we can, and that being a comfortable, safe space to be able to say, like, I'm saying no to this. I'm not rejecting you. I just, with, you know, being able to set meaningful boundaries. I mean, again, a lot of this sounds like good, just basic, you know, rules for how we engage in meaningful relationships. I will also add that funding and providing concrete benefit to the CBO helps. You know, being able to, we ask a lot of our CBOs to contribute in kind. Oftentimes this is because we ourselves haven't figured out, you know, how we're going to get the money, and we need to do a lot of pre-work to be able to get that grant. But remember, for the community-based organization, multiple attempts to ask for labor delivered in kind can start to really burn them out. And they don't have a lot of flexibility in their budgets, and their jobs are not conceptualized around going to get grants. And so any time that they're giving you towards that effort is literally from the generosity of their spirit, right? So when you do have small pots of money that you can put up front to help underwrite that expense, I have found that goes a long way. I also find that when I write my grants, I make sure that I really fund the community-based organization that I work with in a meaningful way. So I often see that what happens when grants go in, we're very good about funding ourselves as co-investigators and the PI. We make sure we have our research assistants, and then the budget gets so small that we then have very little left for the community-based organization. And I have found that when I work with the CBO and I'm able to fund that work fairly, I find that the relationship actually goes a lot better. There's less asks that are unfunded, and I find that there is it makes our ability to partner stronger. And then in terms of thinking about, again, sort of laying this groundwork, so some of the things that we talk about is having a SMART goal. So picking something to do that is small, concrete, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. I think Monique alluded to that too. Start with an ask that is narrow and prescribed, a goal that you're going to achieve, right, together in your partnership. This doesn't have to be a grant. It can be a consulting project, a speaking engagement, student volunteer project. So we have things as faculty and investigators here at UCI that we can bring to the CBO, particularly student volunteers or student projects, data analysis, literature review. We can come bringing something rather than just asking the community-based organization to deliver something to us, right? So think, maybe as part of the conversation when we get to question and answer, we can sort of think about what are some of the untangible things that we can bring and receive from our partnerships. Be around the organization. So show up and attend events. For my community partners, when I'm in it, I'm really in it. Like when they invite me to, when I have been to moms fundraisers, I have donated to moms. I actually care about moms of Orange County as part of my personal life. So when you are looking to create that relationship with your community-based organization, you've got to show up and be committed. It can't just be about the ask, a single ask. Share articles, share information, and share, when you see a great talk happening at UCI, invite your community partners to join. When you see your community partners doing great things in the community, invite your colleagues at UCI to participate. Again, it's so much of what we know about how we build meaningful relationships apply in this context. And then recognize the soft benefits that really come from these community partnered relationships. So, I think that the work that I do in partnership with the organizations that I work with is some of the most fun. It's the most creative. It allows me really to think about the meaning of my work and engaging in a way with your community-based organizations where you recognize just how unique this relationship is, and bringing that enthusiasm, I think, again, all goes towards contributing to that relationship of trust and respect. But clear boundaries, SMART goals, clear communication, articulated effort, and I think those are some of the best ways to start that process. I'm also going to just point out that there are online educational resources. So AAMC, I guess, has some online educational resources. And then also through the ICTS, we offer, there's a great, usually through our K&T scholars, Josh does a great talk on recruitment. I do some work on community engagement. So there's a lot of the ICTS, CTSAs around the country have community engagement materials on their websites. And there's just a lot written and available on the topic if you want to dive in from a more literary perspective. Robin, do you want to add anything? I kind of talked for a while there, sorry.
No, that was awesome. I learned so much. No, I don't really have a lot to add. I think the two things that I was thinking about as everybody has been talking is somebody at some point I learned this concept of having a discussion about with a give-get kind of idea where both parties or however many parties are involved, everybody gets to say what they have to give and what it is they need to get from the relationship. And I think that can be a really great conversation to have because, you know, everything that's been said today, you know, and is very, very true about the community organizations. It's also true that faculty, they have things that they have to meet in order to further their career, and that it's important that the community organization understands that as well. So, you know, it goes both ways. And I wanted to make sure to bring that up. And then I wanted to also talk about how I know Monique and Pam mentioned, you know, how they really protect the people that they serve. And I wanted to say another way that we have built trust with our community partners is that we protect our community partners that we work with. So in order, like if somebody comes for a consultation with us and we think we might have a great person in the community that they might be able to partner with, you know, we would definitely want to be involved in making that communication, or at least talking with the researcher ahead of time. We're not going to just send out a list of organizations and say, yeah, here, go talk to these folks, because we want to make sure that we protect, you know, our relationship with them, and that they know that they're really valuable to us. And so, yeah, those are the two things I wanted to say about that.
Can I jump in real quick about relationships or the whole projects? I think we're spending a lot of time on the getting to know you, but really the whole project has to be examined from start to finish, because small things like a university that approached me about doing some focus groups with our clients, well-known university, lots of research experience. And we talked about it. It sounded great. I looked at the materials. I was okay with anything. We sat in on the focus groups, and at the very end, they had a stipend they were going to pay the client, and they asked them to produce their driver's license or social security card so they could give them their stipend. Well, most of the mothers looked like Monique, just looked there with their eyes got real big, and they just left because they were so mortified. And that, that undid a whole lot of trust in the community. So you have to look at everything from the materials. Another great example was we had been given materials for recruitment, and it was about relaxation and how do you relax in a stressful time, pregnancy, blah. And when we looked at it and started translating it, instead of relax, they were trying to be glib, and it was like cut loose and have free, except the way that they just used the words in cut loose translated to diarrhea, have diarrhea, so that blows everything out of the water, and things like that. So it's not just, now you've established the relationship, things are great, but now you really have to get input. Don't study me without me, so get it from the whole way, all the way through, so you don't have those little things that blow up in your face.
Michael, could I add a couple things? That was all fantastic stuff. Pam, I love that. That's like the Chevy Nova example, trying to sell a car in Mexico that translates to no go.
Yeah.
So, I want to perhaps re-emphasize a couple of things that have been said. I agree with Robin that these relationships are fragile. And I think it's important to say out loud that in many cases, what we're trying to do is not only build trust, but we're trying to overcome decades of decayed trust. And we're trying to recruit populations who have every reason to be skeptical of the healthcare industry in this country, or what, research in particular. So that's a lot of work. And, a couple wrong steps can really undo a lot of heavy effort. So there is every reason to be extremely thoughtful and cautious in our approach to these things, and they really do require a heavy investment of time. And I thought Dara was very thorough and really on point on so many levels. But I will say that a lot of what we're talking about now is kind of aiming at the individual investigator, and just a couple of added things from a programmatic standpoint. If you are in a position to have a collection of investigators or a longstanding partnership with a community, which I'm very privileged to be a part of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center here at UCI, where we have more of a programmatic approach. And in that setting, we've done a couple of things. We have community advisory boards who are composed of members of the community who already have kind of a vested interest in our area of research. These might be people who work at organizations that help Alzheimer's caregivers, or they may be Alzheimer's caregivers themselves, or people who've lost loved ones. And so having a group of people who can serve as a sounding board for a particular community is extremely valuable for us. They can help us with thinking about making sure we don't make those mistakes or are culturally insensitive on materials that we're producing or our approach to things. And then we like to sort of elevate some of those folks as well. So we have community advisory boards, but we also have something called a leadership council, which is composed of a variety of types of people. And we make sure that our leadership council is as diverse as the people we're trying to recruit to our studies. And I think that it really increases their investment in us as an operation, as an organization, and wants to see us be successful in our mission, which includes making sure that our studies are representative of all the different people who suffer from the disease. So those are kind of more programmatic tools that may not be immediately available to that first-time investigator who's trying to do a study, but down the line might really be valuable to them as they continue their work.
Great. Thank you all so much. Why don't we move on to tackle a few other areas, and I'll turn it over to Amir to introduce vignette number 2.
All right, so the vignette number 2 is a little bit different in the sense that it also talks about altering or changing the workflow of a community organization. So Sarah is a behavioral psychologist, and she designed an mHealth solution to provide a stress management intervention to family caregivers and their social networks. The mobile health intervention is what is called a human-in-the-loop approach, which means Sarah needs to learn about the preferences and daily experiences of family caregivers to help her design her intervention. She has found an established community organization that provides a traditional home visitation program, including self-management skills to family caregivers. So Sarah wants to recruit a sample of the family caregivers to help her test out the feasibility of her intervention. There are several challenges that she faces, including that she is reaching out to persons from the population who may not speak English and as a first language, and that she will need to alter the organization's usual workflow to get the information that she needs and integrate this intervention. So the question number 1 is, when designing the recruitment strategy and materials, what are some of the key issues that Sarah should be considering? We can start with Josh and Adriana, if you will.
Sure. So I kind of want to channel Dara and say everything Dara said before still applies here. Really, she should not think about changing the organization's workflow. She should think very hard about how she can make her research fit with their workflow and be easy for them. I think a couple of things that maybe haven't been said yet is would include, as she's building her research team, she really wants to think about hiring people who look like the people she's trying to recruit, who are going to be able to relate, make them feel welcome, be able to speak their language, and put them at ease if she's able to successfully recruit them. And going back to Pam's really remarkable, sadly not uncommon example that she first gave about investigators really not necessarily putting themselves in the position of the people they're trying to recruit, she's going to really want to think about how she can make it easy for people to say yes to being in her study. I'll just close with one brief snippet, which is, I'm a big proponent in paying people to be in research. I think financial incentives make a lot of sense. There's a really nice paper in the New England Journal of Medicine a few years ago that outlines a structure for this that I like to make people aware of. You can reimburse people, you can compensate people, and you can incentivize people. Reimbursement means you make it cost neutral. They're not paying to be in your study. That's the bare minimum. That every study should achieve that. We should not expect people to pay out of pocket to help us do what we want to do. Compensation is paying someone a fair wage, which would be something like minimum wage and the amount of time that they're going to spend participating in your study. And again, that's just barely above that minimal standard. And if you really want to help someone make a decision that they might not otherwise make to be in your study, to give you the time and energy and whatever else you're asking them, then you might want to incentivize them and offer them additional financial reasons to be in your study. I personally think all of these are very much ethical. I think that the threshold for achieving an undue influence is a difficult one that few of us are adequately funded to approach. So I think that making it easy for people to be in your study by offering them incentives, financial and otherwise, and in our hands, one of the things that people really like to get as an incentive is more information from the research that they don't have access to themselves. Sometimes you have to be careful about that. You don't want to ruin your data or do anything inappropriate. So it's very much a case-by-case study. But what can you tell people they'll get out of being in this study? And that's going to help the community partner sell the study to their folks as well.
Yes, I just want to add to what Josh said. Having done these community engagement studios in lower sociodemographic areas, for example, in a study on diabetes, and when we asked them, would $20 be enough? Would $50 be enough? They said, yeah, that's great. But what I want to know is exactly what you just told me, this information. I didn't know that my child shouldn't do this or should do that. And I think that's where a lot is missing. So helping them connect that, and then they're more likely to share about your study to their friends and letting them know, this is what I've learned, you should check them out. So of course, paying them is very important, but think of other ways that you can help them.
Great, thank you so much. There's another question related to this vignette, and that is maybe Pamela and Monique can kind of comment on it. The question is, what are some specific actions that the academic partner can take to maximize her chances of successfully meeting her research goals with her community partner?
Do you want to go first, Monique, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
I think we had a breakdown of communication there.
Yeah, sorry, I was making a note.
Yeah.
I was I wanted to make some follow-up comments from the previous. I did just want, from a technical aspect, to say that not all community organization partners have the same level of nimbleness. This is a tactical thing from the research perspective. Some organizations can say, oh, you want to do this? And maybe their director or a manager or whomever has the ability to act upon things. Other organizations have more hierarchy and need to go to boards and do a lot of other things. So it's important as part of your understanding in terms of timelines and access, that in some organizations, there will be more levels of permission, maybe, than in others. And I just wanted to point that out, because we talked a lot about relationships, but there are also actual organizational technical pieces that people need to keep in mind. In terms of the compensation, I also just wanted to say that for some of our families who've been involved in focus groups, having somebody ask them what they think or what their experience has been or what they, what's important to them or what they've been through, and the fact that that information will be translated and communicated to others has value as well. I'm not saying you don't pay people, but I am saying that sometimes people aren't heard and they're invisible. And the fact that their experience might make its way into an important conversation that informs other people's decisions is valuable. And people should remember that even as they approach it, that there are some people who are thinking somebody cares about what I have to say, what I've been through, and what I think should happen. How that, of course, is if that's a part of that kind of research design. And then I did want to give an example of recent research that we've just done with Dan Cooper's group for some pediatric COVID research. And, you know, they took on a complicated piece because they did several different schools, several different types of schools. So from an organizational framework, they did a large school district that was going to require one kind of approach. They did a private school that was going to require another kind of approach. A school like El Sol that was going to need another kind of approach. And they had real specific goals that they were trying to meet for their research. And there was a sense of urgency related to the fact that this was COVID and people wanted to know some stuff that they didn't previously know, and decisions were getting made. So a lot had to happen at the same time. But what I want to say is that what this idea of participating in that process, even under time constraints, was probably the biggest reasons for its success. What do you think of this flyer? How many people can we get? We might have said, they might have thought, can you get 100? Well, maybe we could get 50. There's a negotiation that happens around, and then there's reality, because they might say, can you get 100? And we might say, well, we think we can get 50. And then, well, it turns out we only got 30. I just want to, or it may be the opposite. Well, we only think we can get 50. Oh, 75 people showed up.
Yeah.
I managing, being able to talk through those things, even in a short time frame, is important. But I guess what I really want to underscore is that now I don't know what I wanted to underscore. Is that there's a lot of complex work on the researcher that's not just the research. That's really about managing the project. And if you come in with that idea in mind, then it'll be less frustrating for you and more beneficial in the long term. And the last thing I wanted to say was, in terms of resources, your graduate assistants and your undergraduates looking for a good project are great resources for your background support and finding people who mirror the community that you'll be engaged with.
Yeah, all really good points. So when I first read this vignette, I highlighted in like 8 different colors, alter the organization's workflow. That is just inherently the worst place to start. And I think you can all see that very clearly. You know, that's never going to fly. And I agree with Josh, compensation is extremely important at an adequate level. And it should be kind of the icing on the cake, really, because you've already asked them their opinion, you've appreciated them, You've done all of this right. And then at the end of it, still getting that food card or that card to Target is just like the ice. It's like the cherry on top, and it goes a long way for making people feel well. And I'd also like to bring up bias, implicit bias. We all have it. Explicit, we kind of know. Implicit is we don't know. And some of the researchers I alluded to in the beginning, they said, well, we all know that low-income people won't do anything without getting paid for it. And after I picked myself off the floor, I said, I really disagree with that statement. And I said, I think we can recruit mothers because they want to help out mothers like themselves, and they want to be listened to. So I took it on as kind of a personal challenge in that we didn't mention any compensation to the clients when we were speaking to them. And yet we had a lot of people sign up. And then we were able to bring up the fact they would be compensated. So they're biased. You know, they had a very but yet I think they thought they were great-hearted community researchers, but those kind of statements come across loud and clear. The other thing, and I think that's been alluded to also, is to talk to the staff, you know, because even as the CEO, I can make the final decisions and I have all the authority, but I'm still not the one in a daily interaction with that client. And so having the researchers come and present to the staff about the issue, about what the scope of the problem is, about what the current research already shows, about why they want to know this and what their research they hope will come of it, is powerful. And the same with the board. I asked the researchers to come to speak to our board. And you know, anyone that feels like they're part of a solution is going to be more eager to participate. And then when things are all wrapped up and there's an actual article that's been published, you know, this may sound really selfish and petty, but pay that respect to the organization in the article itself, or list them. You know, that really means a lot to an organization. And that kind of, I appreciate you. That's kind of like the final, you know, the final, really the big cherry on top, just to say that. So, because we all know how important publications are. And, but the nonprofit world doesn't know about publications. They want to be in the center of OC Metro with a whole article on their organization. That's the kind of publications they want. You know, so when my first article was published in the Journal of Maternal Child Nursing with my co-PIs, you know, it was such a thrill. And I wanted to show it to my mom, who's my biggest cheerleader. And she said, where's the pictures of you? And I'm like, it's not that kind of magazine, Mom. It has charts and pie graphs. And, you know, but that wasn't very impressive to her. But that's really impressive to the professional community that we're all a part of. And thanking them in that article, or putting them as, I never in a million years thought I could be a co-PI. But 9 articles later, I guess I really am. So anyway, that's all.
Thank you so much. Very valuable answers. So a third question is more around the role of technology, because there's many studies have some sort of technology involved in them. So, and this is actually for all our panelists, so please feel free to chime in. And the question is, what special considerations may come into play when the researcher is using technology to communicate with or collect information from research participants?
And I can take that if you want. Margaret and I have an opportunity to be working on a large-scale evaluation for the state. And I think some of the things that we've learned is, you know, smartphones, a lot of people have smartphones now. They're almost ubiquitous. I mean, pretty much, you know, they're there. But just because someone has a smartphone doesn't mean that everybody uses the smartphone the same way. So when you're thinking about using technology to facilitate recruitment, you just want to be aware of things like what kinds of platforms do particular kinds of people gravitate to? What are some, you know, how do people use their smartphones? So are there going to be concerns around data? You know, having enough data to be able to engage in your project in the way that you want them to. Do they have access to Wi-Fi, or are they going to be using their data plans? So in COVID, we saw that that Wi-Fi access was really a problem in a lot of our communities, that, you know, with a lot of people working at home, and for a while, kids were at home, so people just didn't have enough bandwidth on their Wi-Fis, even if they, on their systems, even if they had them. And then probably the third thing I would say is, different age groups use their phone differently. Some of our, when we work with older adults, some of them are like, savvy, no problem. Some of them have never downloaded an app. So some of them don't have a smartphone, but so there's just a lot of variation, and this is a big topic to try and tackle in 3 minutes, but all of it to say it's something that there is work and thought on the topic, and if you and it's worth definitely being very systematic and deliberate about how you're going to engage technology. I didn't even get into like translation, cultural sensitivity, thinking about your message, communication. I mean, this is like a whole topic. So I see Josh, he's going to jump in.
No, I think you're totally right. And I think it really boils down to things that have been said for every other question, which is you have to know your community and you have to know the people you're trying to recruit. And I totally agree with everything Dara said. I actually am somewhat remiss in that I don't think we've gone far enough to try to study how we can better use technology to reach people that we've been historically not so good at reaching. And I think that cultural sensitivity is key, but I think there's also unique avenues to reaching through, novel social media outlets that particular communities use prominently. And can we get can we start to gain trust and increase awareness of our research in those unique communities through those unique pathways? So I'm kind of eager to try to study this a little bit more as a novel way, because I agree, the smartphones and other technologies are increasingly ubiquitous. We just have to understand them better so that we know how best to reach people.
Thank you so much. Maybe for the sake of time, I can hand it over to Margaret to facilitate the Q&A. We have about 15 minutes.
Sure. Did anyone else want to jump in and say anything more about using technology in community partnerships?
I just want to say one thing. Because just yesterday, I'm lucky enough to work with Amir on a project that's using technology to address issues of maternal depression. And, it also is, yes, everybody has a cell phone. Most of them, the age group they're in, they're using apps or they're using text and they're pretty adept. But if they forget to charge their phone, all the technology doesn't help. And so we came out to we should probably ask someone, how often do you charge your phone? How many times a week does your phone die because you haven't charged it? Because it's surprising to me the young people that were like, oh yeah, I always forget to charge it, So again, know your patients and have them talk to you before you ever set that up, so you can learn these things. Sometimes though, like what we're going through, it's been trial and error, true science, right? Try this, did it work? No, okay. Anyway, I was surprised you didn't talk about it, Amir, because it's so perfect for this.
Thanks,
Can I just mention one more thing? It's all the way back up to the beginning of the discussion, and it's about resources for recruitment. And I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Research Match as an option for recruitment. And so Research Match is it's a national it's a nonprofit that is it's a national database registry that's funded by the NIH. And let's see, I wrote myself some notes. What did I want to say about that? It just helps to connect people in the community with researchers at medical centers around the US. And so it's researchmatch.org. And basically, if you're an investigator, you can sign up on Research Match and then gain access to this entire database of people. And it's really good for if you're doing surveys and that kind of thing, because then you can do your survey out in, nationally. You can recruit locally, but for the research match that we have in our area, we don't have a lot of people signed up on research match in Orange County. We just haven't had the bandwidth to really grow that here. But it's a great resource for people. And if you want to learn more about that, both Adriana and I manage that registry for UCI here. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Thank you, Robin. And I also wanted to mention another resource that I don't think has come up in our conversation thus far, which is our Campus Community Research Incubator Awards. So the ICTS does give out a few small grants every year to nurture research partnerships between academic researchers at UCI and people in the community. And it's actually, I've used this mechanism myself, and it's a fantastic way of nurturing a budding partnership between yourself and some community group that you are interested in working with. So I encourage you to go to the ICTS website and check that out. I will also mention that all of the resources that have been mentioned today will be included in a fact sheet that we're going to send out to everybody who registered for this webinar. So if you missed anything, don't worry, we will share that with you and give you all the links that people have talked about. In terms of the questions that have been posted to the chat, I find it interesting. It's kind of a mix of very, very specific questions and incredibly large questions. So in terms of the large questions, I think the heart of it comes up in one question, which is posted, how do you define a community? And I think that's a wonderful jumping off question because it's enormous. And I wonder if anybody in our panel would like to address, how do you define community?
Everybody who's not you. So in simple terms, it's that you have your own little group, your own little peeps you hang out with every day. And so it's everyone else.
Yeah, I think another way you might operationalize a little bit is, in a best case scenario, who is your research trying to help? We do research because we want to help, large populations, more than just the number we could help by individual interactions. We're trying to gain knowledge so that we can improve the human condition. And when you think about the research you're conducting and the knowledge you're trying to gain to help the human condition, which people are you trying to help? And that's probably a good place to begin in defining your community. And as we do research, we may narrow our focus to try to help specific populations of people who suffer from a disease, or maybe it's all disease sufferers. And so thinking about that and thinking about who locally is representative of the population you're trying to help is probably a good way to start defining your community. And then as you do that, you want to think about, are there individuals or organizations locally who best epitomize those groups, who you could try to connect with to help establish relationships like everybody's been talking about the whole time, and who will care that you're trying to help that community. And maybe that's a good place to start. And I think it's an exercise worth undertaking as you're starting to do your research.
I have a slightly different way of thinking about it. So I do think about, like, who are the people you're trying to help? I actually come at it as who has a stake in the problem you're trying to solve. So, and sometimes that stake is much bigger than where I choose to engage in the community. But I think as a vision, it's fun for me to think about all of the stakeholders in the problem I'm trying to solve, and which allows me then to, if I'm interested, to work all the way down in sort of basic science questions, all the way up to population health and policy. But I think ultimately community is everybody beside you, just like Pam said. I thought that was exactly right.
Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Josh. Robin or Michael or Amir, do you have anything to add? Monique? Adriana?
I think in the spirit of trial and error, I did just want to put out there that not everything works, not every relationship works, but that doesn't, going through the process of trial and error and doing some evaluation of either self or the project or other is an important exercise in continuing to be committed in seeking out community as defined largely here. That, if you did something and it didn't work out, and now you don't know what to do, it does not mean that you can't go out there and find a different partner or a different approach or come at it again. And I would just encourage people who may be intimidated by that process to understand that it's worth the exercise in the scientific method to try to resolve how you get to the successful execution of involving more people from the community in your research.
One resource I forgot that we should have included, Margaret, and I'll try to send you the links, is what if you're brand new, you've not stepped foot off the campus really, and you're just wondering who's serving individuals with a certain issue or disease or problem. There's all kinds of registries out there. Orange County Community Foundation has a registry of nonprofits, what their mission is, what their size is, who's in charge, what they do. Orange County Healthier Together is very health focused. They have a whole list of organizations, and there's nothing to be lost by calling up an organization and saying, "Hi, I'm Pam Pimentel. I read about your organization. I'm really interested in learning more. Could I meet with you?" And if maybe the CEO won't put someone else in that, but put yourself out there, and that's how you'll find organizations that have a similar mission match and value match to you. But there's several of them. I'll try to put a list together and send it off to Margaret so it can be in the facts.
That's great, Pam. That'd be very helpful. So there are a couple comments that have come in related to long-term relationships with groups in the community, and I think I'm safe in saying that that's what we're encouraging here. I think that we don't encourage the parachute in, get your research done and get out of town model. That really what we're trying to say is that successful community campus partnerships are long-term. And I'll give an example, a partnership that I've had with a middle school in Long Beach for about 20 years now, which started as an NIH-funded study in which the academic team, went out and recruited schools to be part of a study that we were planning. But because we were successful in building a mutually beneficial partnership, one of the schools that I've worked with in that area has continued to work with me for 20 years. And to the point where during COVID, when I had to pull out because we couldn't go to the schools at all, they've been pestering me saying, "When are you coming back?" So, that is what it's about, is creating these long-term partnerships and having a larger vision, I believe, about being open to new directions. We may not know in 10 years what that partnership is going to look like, as long as we continue to stay engaged and allow perhaps the community partners to have some agency in determining new research questions. That, I think, would be what I would consider a really successful partnership. And unless anyone else would like to jump in at the end here, we're now at 3:28. And I want to turn it back to, I think, Amir, did you have a few closing comments, I think?
Yes, first of all, I wanted to once again thank our panelists for making the time and sharing their invaluable experience and knowledge with us. Thank you so much. And I have some quick announcements. One is that you will be receiving an evaluation email coming to you, of course, to your email. And please kindly share your thoughts, comments, suggestions with us. And the reason is that this is a series, so this is not the basically the only or the last panel. We are trying to also arrange similar panels on kind of pressing topics. The third panel or webinar will be in about 3 months, and we'll focus on doing mixed methods in human subject research. So we'll be sharing with you more information about it, hopefully in a month or two. But just a heads up, that it's coming up. And other than that, I don't have any other comments. Thank you for participating in this seminar, and once again, thank you everyone, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Amir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.